Today we're going to be looking at the 5-point graphing method with a cosine graph and with a period change. So first of all, let's revisit the parent graph of cosine. Remember the amplitude is 1, so it goes from -1 to 1 on the range. Cosine at 0 is 1. At pi over 2 it's 0. At pi it's -1. At 3 pi over 2 it's 0, and then at 2 pi it's 1. And so that's one full period. Oh my goodness, there we go. But I want you to go the other way too, remember 5 points the other way. So this is going to be 0 at negative pi over 2, and then -1 at negative pi, 0 at -3 pi over 2, and 1 at -2 pi. And so there is my cosine wave. So we're going to go over here and we're going to use this parent function in the 5 points to graph this example too. So y equals 1/2 cosine of 3 theta. Remember, we need to identify the amplitude and the period. So our amplitude, I'll kind of rewrite our format. It's y equals a cosine b theta. So a is always the amplitude. A is the amplitude. So that's just going to be 1/2. And then b helps us find the period. But the period, we'll just write this, the period equals 2 pi divided by b. So in this case, b is 3, so it's 2 pi divided by 3 is our period. Okay, so first things we need to do is figure out, instead of going out 2 pi, whenever I make my new graph, a full period, a full cycle will be completed in 2 pi over 3. So I have 1, 2, 3, and it's split into 4 sections. I need to figure out how to split these 4 sections. Well, from 0 to 2 pi over 3 needs to be cut into fourths. So take 2 pi over 3 divided by 4, or multiply it by a fourth. So that's 2 pi over 12, which simplifies to pi over 6. So each one of these little tick marks represents pi over 6. So pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, I'm going to write this down here, 2 pi over 6, which is the same thing as pi over 3. Didn't want you to think that I pulled that out of thin air. And then 3 pi over 6, which is the same thing as pi over 2, is what I'm going to put here, pi over 2. Then going backwards is easy, it's the same thing, just negative. So I've got negative pi over 6, negative pi over 3, negative pi over 2, and -2 pi over 3. So now I have my period graphed. All I did was have to change these, my x values. Now I have to change my amplitude, so I'm only going to go up to 1/2 and down to a -1/2. Okay, so now I graph the same points, the 5 points, but I use these marks instead of those marks. So at 0, cosine would be at 1/2. At pi over 6, it's going to be at 0. At pi over 3, it's going to be at -1/2. At pi over 2, it's going to be at 0. And then at 2 pi over 3, it's going to be at 1/2. So everything was squeezed in, and it only goes from -1/2 to 1/2. And then the same thing goes over this way. This is 0. At negative pi over 3, it's -1, or 1/2, -1/2. At negative pi over 2, it's 0, and at negative 2 pi over 3, it's 1/2. So here is our cosine wave now. And so that kind of shows you that we're squeezed in, and then we're not going quite as high. I hope that this was helpful. Please email me questions. I want to help you. I care about you. And have a great day.